All right, y'all, I got a bunch of giant breaking news here for you. So probably the most important one, and this came out yesterday, is that there's a Trump-appointed judge in Texas who ruled on the invocation from the regime of the Alien Enemies Act. And this was devastating and vicious and clear as clear can be. He says this is illegal. You can't deport people under the Alien Enemies Act, certainly not the way that you're doing it. So I highly recommend you go read the whole decision. This is a Maga judge who's just like, breaks out the flamethrower and goes to town. But the idea is, look, the Alien Enemies Act was only invoked previously to go when we were actually at war. Like we had to actually officially be at war with another country. Well, needless to say, we don't have a declaration of war against the government of Venezuela, right? And so it falls apart from that perspective, number one. Like, it's clearly illegal based on that. But then furthermore, even if you grant them, which you shouldn't, that, oh, it's okay, we could be at war against Tren de Aragua, the gang, well, it still falls apart on the substance because, as you all know, they're not presenting any evidence whatsoever that the people they're deporting are actually in Tren de Aragua. In fact, we know that up to 90% of the people that were sent to the concentration camp in El Salvador with no due process, they have no criminal record whatsoever. And so the argument falls apart in multiple different ways. And this was not like a gray area, wishy-washy, middle ground decision from this Maga judge. This Maga judge ripped to shreds the argument that the Trump regime was using. And this is also an indication that as we move forward here and we get more cases on the stuff that they're doing, I mean, look, the Supreme Court is going to agree with this guy. They just are. We've already had the 9-0 ruling against, or saying that Trump has to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Now, the regime just lied about that relentlessly, and Stephen Miller pretended like they said the opposite. But what are you going to do when there's 5, 6, 7, 12 different decisions directly from the Supreme Court where there is no wiggle room and there is no nuance, and every court, with right-wing judges, left-wing judges, and centrist judges, are all saying the same fucking thing? And I have to pat myself on the back a little bit here because I was telling you guys early on that so many of these things that the regime is doing, it doesn't matter what the ideological perspective is of the judge in question. The judge will say, this is not acceptable. This has gone too far, and this is clearly not legal. And so that's exactly what we're seeing in this instance. They don't have any bullshit argument they can use of, oh my God, this is some flaming lefty. No, it is literally a Trump-appointed judge in Texas who says you got to stop deporting people using the Alien Enemies Act because this falls apart on the facts of the case. So highly, highly recommend you go read the entire decision. It is brutal, it is vicious, it is on point, and it's a harbinger of things to come where every court is going to say the same thing. And I told you guys too, same thing when it comes to all the shit Doge is doing. There's not a single thing that Doge has done that is legal. And this isn't a difficult conclusion to come to, right? We know that Congress has the power of the purse, and then the president signs a bill, and then the funds go to the Treasury, and the Treasury disperses it. But guess what? We made it so that the richest man in the world, the wealthiest robber baron, can usurp Congress and the president and delete whatever he wants. That's insane. And that's just another example where every court that's heard arguments on that sort of stuff too, no matter what their ideology is, they're going, of course this is illegal. So it's a totally separate question as to whether or not it'll matter, whether or not they'll stop doing what they're doing. But certainly the judicial branch is doing their job in the sense that they are providing checks and balances, and they are interpreting the law in this instance correctly. And so that definitely is heartening to see. And I'm sure Maga will come up with some bullshit counter argument. They'll try to dismiss it because the judge, I believe the judge has a Hispanic name. And so, of course, they're going to use that. Judge Rodriguez, they're going to use that against him. But again, he was a MAGA judge, a right-wing judge, appointed by Trump. But unfortunately, we live in a world where nothing matters to these people because they're prolific liars. They lie about everything. And so they might bulldoze ahead. But it's great to see that the judicial branch is doing their job in this respect. That makes me very, very happy to see. And I think, again, we're going to see way more decisions that are exactly like this, where you have right-wing judges who just absolutely obliterate the bullshit, fake arguments of the Trump regime. Okay, so I also got to give you this. Stephen Miller, he was doing a press conference the other day, and he said that the regime is now going to cut off all federal funding to schools that don't teach, quote-unquote, patriotism. Now, I don't think I even need to explain this to you guys for you to understand it, but what this means effectively is we want all schools all across this country to teach what we want them to teach, how we want them to teach it. So in other words, we want right-wing perspectives and MAGA perspectives in the classroom. We want to whitewash, for example, the legacy of the Native American genocide and slavery and segregation and redlining. That's the idea here. The idea is let's bias the curriculum across this country in a right-wing perspective. I'm sure they're going to downplay the successes of the New Deal, downplay or even not talk about the successes of the civil rights movement. This is the idea. And what they're doing is threatening all federal funding unless schools comply with a far-right perspective. So this, of course, this flies in the face of academic freedom. This flies in the face of freedom of speech. It's a war on accurate history because, of course, what these guys want is a massively biased and inaccurate perspective about how the right wing is correct about everything. This is really dangerous stuff now, man. This is really, really dangerous stuff. And if any Democratic president did the opposite of this and said, "Oh, we're only giving funds to schools that teach the version of history we like," well, there'd be absolute meltdown on the right. We all know that. But the other thing is, if a Democratic president were to do that, at least you'd get a more accurate retelling of history. But in this instance, they're going all in, and you already know they destroyed the Department of Education. The crazy thing is, so they're stopping all of the good things that the Department of Education does, right? But it still exists to like shake down students who have student loan debt. So it's just a worst of all worlds. Now, further evidence to this effect, by the way, is that as Judd Legum is reporting, next school year, thousands of high school students in Oklahoma will be required to learn about Trump's debunked claims that the 2020 election was tainted by fraud. The lesson will not be part of a course on conspiracy theories, but an actual official component of the new social studies curriculum. So Oklahoma is making a decision to flat out destroy their education system. Now, the guy who runs the schools there is already a psycho, and I believe he was the guy who tried to put Trump Bibles in the classroom. Any Bible in the classroom, in a public classroom, is completely unconstitutional because it's a violation of separation of church and state, right? But he spent a tremendous amount of taxpayer money on Trump Bibles, funneling money to Trump, probably as a bribe too, by the way. And now they want to teach that the 2020 election was rigged. Guys, this sort of assault on the education system is not something that this country can withstand because you're going to have a bunch of brainwashed little freaks that grow up and then they take the reins of power, right? This is an attempt to guarantee that the current fascist takeover that we're seeing, that this lasts into the future. Obviously, you take over the schools and you take over the minds of the kids. So, I mean, it's just so wild because all the 2020 election conspiracies have been debunked 47 ways to Sunday. I mean, there is not a fucking shred of evidence for the shit they claim. Remember when we had the Arizona audit where MAGA claimed we definitely won Arizona, we need to audit it, and then they did. Come to find out, Biden won by more votes than what we thought he won by on election day. So the audit proved the opposite. When Rudy Giuliani had to get in front of court, he was saying beforehand, oh, this election is fraudulent, it's fraudulent, it's fraudulent. He gets in front of court, and what does he say? Oh, we're not alleging fraud. Because they can't actually, when they get in front of a fucking courtroom where they're held to standards of evidence, they can't win. But now they want to brainwash the kids with this fucking bullshit. Oh my God. Oh my God, man. All right, I also got to give you guys this. This is terrifying. So, Homeland Security and the Secret Service issued a criminal search warrant in an upscale Irvine neighborhood. And they were targeting a suspect that they believed was responsible for posting flyers with the names, photos, phone numbers, and locations of ICE agents in Southern California in February. So the guy wasn't home and an arrest wasn't made, but they're looking for this guy. Now, this guy, by the way, he lives at home with his parents. He was previously arrested at UC Irvine during an on-campus pro-Palestine protest, okay? And so now Homeland Security and the Secret Service are wasting tremendous amounts of resources because this guy put up flyers saying, here are the ICE agents who are breaking the law. By the way, none of this stuff is illegal. It's not illegal to put up the posters. Now, you might think, oh, maybe it should be because it's doxing or whatever. You could have that opinion, but as the law is right now, none of this is illegal. They did a massive raid with like a dozen cars and all these law enforcement officials, and they were trying to arrest a guy who was at a pro-Palestine protest, but they're trying to arrest him because he fucking flyers. Because the regime doesn't take any dissent. No dissent whatsoever. Aren't there better things for you guys to be doing instead of destroying the First Amendment in this country day after day? So this is where we're at. The Gestapo are here. The stormtroopers are here. And, you know, if you criticize them, that's the highest crime to them. Again, there's videos and stuff floating around about this. If you see how many resources they used for this, it is fucking disturbing, bro. It is disturbing. So we also have this, CNN Business is reporting that President Trump is now ordering the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to end federal funding for NPR and PBS. So he's effectively trying to defund NPR and PBS. Now, again, this would be illegal. You would need Congress to act. You can't just do it on your own. But Trump's already been doing 80,000 things on his own illegally and largely getting away with it. But get this. So NPR receives between $2 and $3 million per year in federal funding. That's fucking nothing in the grand scheme of things. PBS receives between $80 and $85 million in public funding. Again, that's way more than NPR, but in the grand scheme of things, it's fucking nothing. Well, the military-themed birthday parade that Trump is trying to throw himself on June 14th, you know how much that's going to cost? $92 million. He's doing a military parade, which, by the way, these sorts of things only happen or predominantly happen in dictatorships. Democracies usually don't do military parades. But on June 14th, he's throwing a $92 million military parade to celebrate himself, to suck himself off. And again, I want to reiterate, if he just didn't do that, you could fully fund NPR and PBS, no problem whatsoever. Right? Look at the priorities. Look at the priorities. It's insane. Obviously, it's not a cost issue in his mind because he just hates NPR and PBS because they're more liberal leaning. But like, look at this bullshit. And then that's to say nothing about Jesus Christ. Imagine over Trump's first term and this part of his second term, how much money has he spent for Secret Service protection while golfing? I mean, he golfs all the fucking time. That's probably over $90 million. And so look at the stuff they're willing to spend money on and look at the stuff that they're cutting. I mean, again, it's almost beyond belief what we're witnessing. All right, so we also have the White House budget was released. We have just a horrific, immoral, disgusting, unethical document. They call for the $1 trillion military budget, as we told you they would. For all the suckers out there who thought maybe they were actually going to cut the military, my fucking ass cheeks, they were going to cut the military. They were never going to do that. How do I know that? Look at Trump's first term. He increased the military budget every single year. So $1 trillion in military spending, that's a 13% jump. $43 billion increase to the Department of Homeland Security. More charter school money. So, by the way, the money going to the Department of Homeland Security, that's for illegally rounding up immigrants. That's what that's for. And then we have cuts. $4 billion cut to low-income home energy assistance program. So home heating assistance. Who needs that? Let these fucking people freeze. $3.5 billion cut to the CDC. $18 billion cut to NIH. That, of course, they're the ones who do stuff like pediatric cancer research, diabetes research, Alzheimer's research, etc. Why the fuck would we need that? $670 million to program management at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. So in other words, that's a massive cut to the administrators of Medicare and Medicaid. Of course, going to lead to massive problems with the organization. $2.5 billion cut to EPA's Clean and Drinking Water Loan Fund. That's great. That's great. $2.5 billion cut to clean water. What could go wrong? $646 million cut to FEMA. The administration says non-disaster programs, but of course that's not true. You know they're trying to just totally eliminate FEMA. Trump's been open about that fact. And a $650 million cut to shelter and service programs. So there's your budget. Basically, beef up the military massively and cut everything else that actually does good. And of course, as you all know, the military failed 7 audits in a row, and they can't account for 63% of their money. But, you know, spend all the money in the area that has the waste, fraud, abuse, and imperialism, and cut the money that actually helps people. Why not? All right, so then there's also this. The Trump regime is not going to renew Biden-era grants worth $1 billion, and these grants were aimed at boosting mental health services in schools. So this is, you know, the right always does this. After there's a mass shooting, bro, it's not about guns. Don't talk about the guns, bro. It's got nothing to do with the guns, bro. It's all about the mental health, bro. We had a mental health crisis, not a gun crisis, bro. We've heard this 1,000 times, right? Okay, well then what's the logical reaction to that? If you're on the right, what should you support? If you don't want to do any gun reform, we need to increase mental health funding so that perhaps we can stop these mass shootings or at least reduce these mass shootings. Instead, Trump cuts $1 billion aimed at boosting mental health services in schools. That's great. That's great. So I never want to hear again from the right, oh, it's not the guns, it's the mental health, because not only are they not in favor of any gun reform, they're also not in favor of increasing funding for mental health. So perhaps they're just pro-school shooting. Perhaps Occam's razor is actually correct. All right, the Senate also overturned an EPA rule on 7 highly toxic air pollutants. If it's also passed by the House, as expected, the action will be the first time Congress has weakened protections under the Clean Air Act. We got to talk a little bit about Fetterman, man. I don't know how many of you guys have seen this article, but there's a New York Magazine article about Fetterman, and it is one of the most brutal things I've ever seen in my life. So in the article, they explain that Fetterman made statements that were verified by his staffers and others, that not only does he oppose a ceasefire, but he said, quote, "Let's get back to killing." Another person who heard the conversation said that he said, quote, "Kill them all," talking about Palestinians. That's what he said, talking about Palestinians. Let's get back to killing and kill them all. We also learned in this piece that the liberal and left-wing conspiracy theory that his wife absolutely despises him and is disgusted by him, that is factual. That is true. In fact, she was begging and pleading with the staffers like, hey man, what are you guys doing? Are you trying to make him more hawkish on this issue of Gaza? You got to go in the other direction. This is crazy. We're seeing them bomb refugee camps and tents and shit. And the staffers were like, bro, we literally are in the same boat as you. We're trying to get him to not be a psychopath, and he can't help himself. He's a psychopath. In the piece, they also describe how when he drives incredibly recklessly and, has nearly gotten into a bunch of different car crashes. They also say, his life is a mess, and he's allegedly not taking his medicine that he needs. Another liberal and left-wing conspiracy theory that turned out to be true, and Fetterman admitted this in the past, is that he became significantly more conservative after his stroke. Like, his stroke gave him brain damage, and as a result of that brain damage, it looks like he became more conservative. Not only that, you all know he's been diagnosed with, severe depression. They say he's not taking his medicine. When you read the article, it doesn't just sound like he's severely depressed to me. It also sounds like he's got bipolar disorder. So, this guy is a fucking total genocidal freak, completely unhinged and out of control, driving incredibly recklessly, not taking his medicine. Nobody around him likes him. They're all disgusted by him. And there's seemingly nothing they could do to keep the train on the tracks. Another thing, this is evidence of bipolar as well when you're in a manic phase. Whenever somebody tries to talk to him about, hey, stop saying, carpet bomb kids in Gaza, he responds like a total megalomaniac, and he says, I'm the most knowledgeable source on Israel and Gaza in the world. They say he never reads his memos. He declines most of his briefings, so he's actively avoiding the actual information, but he turns around and says, I know more about this than anybody else, and I think we should kill them all. This guy, he should not be in Congress, bro. He should not be in Congress. Based off this article, it sounds, if anything, like he should be involuntarily committed. He's not right. He is not right in the head. And it really is the case that I think between the anxiety and the potential bipolar disorder and the depression mixed with the stroke, I really think he's got brain damage. I don't think he's all there. So there you go. That's disturbing. Go read that whole article, by the way, in New York Magazine about John Fetterman. It is wild. All right, so the other thing, while we're on the topic of Gaza and genocidal maniacs, Euromed Monitor is reporting that there was an aid ship that was on its way to Gaza, and Israeli drones hit it in international waters just 17 nautical miles off of Malta. And so now they're going after, this the tiny little threads of hope where the Palestinians can get any food or any medicine, right? Because, they're doing a full blockade of all the food going in there. They haven't had food in, it's probably over 60 days now. People are literally starving to death, over 50, and that's an old number. Over 50 children have starved to death, severely malnourished, etc. So you had this aid ship, and the Israelis in international waters did drone strikes and, tried to take out the aid ship. Eyewitness video shows 2 blasts that disabled the generator and set the deck on fire. All 16 passengers and crew survived after an SOS. Maltese rescue units are towing the ship to port. Incredible. Incredible. So even when you try to find a way to give the Palestinians a lifeline, you are a direct target for the genocidal Israeli psychopaths. All right. Now we got to talk a little bit about Robert F. Kennedy. So this post was all over the place, certainly on my timeline. Apparently, RFK wrote a chapter in his last book about how he doesn't believe in the germ theory of disease. Head of Health and Human Services. And he doesn't believe in the germ theory of disease. This is wild, bro. This is wild. And this is how you get a guy who was, with the measles outbreak, he was telling people take vitamin A. Well, guess what? Then kids were showing up to the emergency room with both measles and vitamin A poisoning. Okay? The guy doesn't know fucking anything. He's a junk science lover, right? He's an alternative medicine crank. The reason why alternative medicine is not just called medicine is because it didn't make the cut. It's not real medicine. All right, so they go on to explain here that RFK seems to think he believes in this theory called the miasma theory, but he actually doesn't even get the facts of that correct. He believes in this thing called like terrain theory, and the idea of terrain theory is, look, if you eliminate environmental toxins and if you eat right, then if you get a disease, it actually doesn't affect you because your immune system is so strong and so powerful that it swats it aside immediately. You have no symptoms. That's of course not true. The germ theory is absolutely correct. It is so fucking ironclad as to not even be debatable anymore in the scientific realm. Every person who has their head screwed on right and has two brain cells to rub together can tell you, of course, germ theory is correct. The idea that, if you just take care of yourself, your body can fight off anything. Like, really? Try that with rabies. Try that with Ebola. Let me know how that goes. There's been diseases throughout history, like the Spanish flu, where the healthier your immune system was, the more likely you were to die. Because what would happen is the virus would trigger a cytokine storm, which means your immune system would basically attack your own body until you die. So he just doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. So he seems to think he believes in miasma theory. He doesn't. Miasma theory is this idea that basically like bad air makes people sick, right? They use the example of like, if you're driving through marshlands in New Jersey and you get that swampy smell, that disgusting smell. Miasma theory is like, that's actually the stuff that makes people sick. It's bad air that makes people sick. Of course, that's totally untrue, has been totally debunked. But RFK thinks he believes in miasma theory, but he doesn't. He actually believes, like I said, in terrain theory, which is this idea that your immune system, as long as you're healthy, as long as you eliminate toxins, as long as you eat right, eat the way RFK wants you to, then you just like the germs can't make you sick. Right? Which, again, is just totally not true. So it is great. We're talking about the head of Health and Human Services does not believe in the germ theory of disease. I mean, people say it all the time, but we really are basically like living out the movie Idiocracy, except perhaps it's worse. Perhaps it's worse. All right, then I also got to bring up here about Cory Booker. So remember, he did his 25-hour non-filibuster filibuster. He held the floor for 25 hours. A lot of people gave him a lot of credit for that. I gave him a lot of credit for that. Just the fact that somebody's doing something and trying to fight back. But guess what? He blew through all of his political capital and all of his support, because what we just learned is Cory Booker and 13 other Democrats voted to advance another Trump appointee. So in other words, Cory Booker was doing what we like to call virtue signaling and pretending, I'm a fighter, bro. I'm on the right side. I'll make sure that I stand up and I'm your voice, bro. We're not going to allow the fascists to take over. And then as soon as he had another opportunity to stab Democrats in the back, he did. And he voted for another Trump appointee. So the reason why this is important, y'all, is because what you have to keep in mind is, like, yes, the show matters, right? Like, the show does matter. Being performative actually does matter in politics. But that has to be married with substantive action. And so my job is to give you guys the facts and the truth and let you know, yeah, he might be posturing, he might be performing like, I'm gonna represent the resistance and I'm gonna go after Trump and I'm not gonna give an inch. But substantively, he's doing a lot of shit like this. He's also taken a tremendous amount of money from the Israel lobby, and he's supported Israel throughout their genocide. So I'm telling you, he is not the one for 2025. Don't be tricked. Don't be fooled. He is not the one. He surged in polls after he did the 25-hour speech. But what you need to understand is his voting record and the facts have to matter more than the performance. Again, the performance matters, but you have to pair that with policy and actually fighting properly, and he's not doing that. He's incredibly two-faced. All right, and then Oh, this one was wild, bro. So, I don't know how many of you guys have seen this, but there's this woman, there's this video that went viral of this white woman. What was she, in Minnesota? I forget what state she was in. But anyway, she was caught on camera calling like a little black boy the N-word. It was caught on camera. And of course, this video blew up, went viral, and people were quite furious at the fact that she's using racial slurs against a little boy. And so what did she do in response to that? Because this is the era of complete and utter shamelessness and immorality. What she did in response to that is she doubled down, played the victim, and launched a GoFundMe. You know how much money she's raised? Literally all she's known for is calling a little black boy the N-word. As I'm talking to you right now, she's raised over $250,000, in theory, to move from where she lives. Stop and think about that, man. Stop it. There was a time where if somebody was caught calling a little black boy the N-word on video, like that would be it. You know, there would be no fan base where like people would be afraid, hey, even if they're racist, I would donate to this woman, but there are social consequences for that. And, you know, maybe I'd lose my job as a result of it. Like, it could go bad for me in a number of different ways. I don't want my name signed up to that, right? There was a time where that's where we were at. Well, now, in the era of Trump, in the era of zero integrity, zero virtuousness, zero honor, zero truth, zero concern for others, no empathy, no sympathy, etc. In this era, the right-wing freak said, fuck it, let's go ham. Let's donate a shitload of money to this woman, and let's make her rich. This shit is so disturbing to me, man. It's so disturbing to me in the same way that it's disturbing to me that, like, George Zimmerman became a right-wing hero. Like, literally all he was known for was killing Trayvon Martin. And even if you say, some people would say, oh, I think it's definitely self-defense, or with Kyle Rittenhouse, somebody's, oh, it's definitely self-defense, or whatever. Regardless of your opinion on that, there's a big difference between saying, hey, in a court of law, he should be exonerated, and saying, no, let's literally put this guy on a pedestal and make them a right-wing hero, where they show up at, like, CPAC events and give speeches and go to Republican fundraisers and are used by, like, right-wing businesses to promote their business, right? This is where we're at in this country. Now, all this white woman is known for is saying the N-word at a little boy, and she's $250,000 wealthier, and by the end of it, she'll probably be $500,000 wealthier, maybe $1 million wealthier. What the fuck has this country become, dog? What has this country become? All right, and then finally, last one I got to give you. God, this is dark, bro. At first, I thought this was fake. I swear I thought this was fake. So, Kanye West, by the way, he's recently been hanging out with Sneeko and Nick Fuentes. And so there was this video of them. They apparently, Kanye didn't know that they were streaming, but they were streaming. And in the video, you see Kanye talking about how he enjoys being cucked. And you have Sneeko agreeing there, too. Nick Fuentes is just sitting there saying nothing on this particular topic, right? So that video came out, and that was wild. As soon as they realized they were streaming, Kanye turned it off. So clearly he doesn't want people to know about this. Although this is also the guy who just told the world that he sucked his cousin's dick until he was 14 years old, which, Jesus Christ, you're admitting to basically SA against, you know, your cousin. And then that guy got into legal trouble because his life was all fucked up. Kanye probably blames himself for... Anyway, that's a different topic. So that was one video that came out of Kanye. Look, clearly, this guy is severely bipolar, potentially even schizophrenic. On top of that, he's also a Nazi. And there's no excuse. You can't just blame the mental illness for the Nazism. Those are separate things. There are a lot of people who have mental illness and they're not fucking Nazis. So he has full agency and he deserves scorn for being a Nazi, right? But he doesn't take his medicine. He's fully bipolar, potentially even schizophrenic. He's certainly going through a manic phase. So right now he's working on new music, and a song of his leaked, and it was on Twitter. And this was on Sneeko's stream, actually, but it made its way over to Twitter. So they played a 43-second clip of one of the songs. Guys, I've never heard anything this embarrassing, this sad, this pathetic, this disturbing. Okay, I can't play it for you because, of course, there's, like, copyright shit. But basically the gist of it is he starts by singing about how I can't see my children. Like, I'm not allowed to see my children, probably because there was a custody hearing and Kim Kardashian won. Wow, what a shocker, right? But he sings about I can't see my children. Then the hook of the song, he goes on to repeatedly say, Heil Hitler. And he says, all my N-words are Nazis. and you got some of his little enabler sycophants around him wearing fucking like Nazi chains and shit and like stunting with him. Look, I don't even know how to react to this, right? Because on the one hand, it's like, I don't want to give him any attention because clearly he thrives off the attention. And I just want to let him be a sideshow and, you know, burn out when nobody gives a fuck about what he's saying anymore. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, it's like, what do we make of a society where people haven't intervened yet to get this man institutionalized so that he gets on medicine and gets his life back on track, right? Like, I don't know what to make of a society that we live in like that. Like, again, I don't want to give him attention. Like, I feel like there are downsides to giving him attention. That it's better to just not talk about it and let him sort of fizzle out by being insane and nobody cares about what he's saying anymore, right? That's one thing, part of my mind. The other part of my mind is like, how the fuck does this man have nobody close enough to him where they could literally get him help, get him institutionalized, get him on medicine, get his life back on track? Because this shit is not, we're all watching like the worst crash out of all time. We all know how this ends. This is not going to end well. When a guy doesn't eat right, doesn't sleep right, is severely bipolar, potentially schizophrenic, has no fucking boundaries, right? He ends up making songs where the hook is Hail Hitler and acts like, you know, everything's cool. Like, what the fuck are we doing, bro? What are we doing? This dude is mentally, deeply, deeply unwell. So, anyway, that's what I got for you guys today. Of course, we'll be back. We got Kyle and Corin, not Kyle and Corin, excuse me. We have Crystal, Kyle, and Friends dropping later today. Everybody go sign up on Substack. You could see the full videos. We spoke to David Dole, who's Canadian. We talked about what happened with the Canadian election. You don't want to miss that. It's really interesting stuff. Talk about Trump's impact on the Canadian election. So we went deep on that. So definitely sign up below on Substack for that. Well, the teaser clips will drop for Crystal, Kyle, and Friends shortly. And outside of that, I'll see y'all soon. Peace.